You're listening to Behind the Sermon from Three Crosses Church. Hello and welcome. My name is Tom Richards and you're listening to Behind the Sermon, where we unpack the deeper questions and the hidden details behind our Sunday sermon. This week we are stepping into the fascinating world of biblical criticism, the work of determining what the original biblical text said. Now that might sound obscure, but it opens up something amazing in our passage. If you compare the English translations of John 1:34, you may be surprised by how different they are. So some translations say, "I have seen and I testify that this is the Son of God." And others say this is God's chosen one. Now that's not just a translation difference, it's the difference in the underlying Greek text. So which one did John actually write? And that question takes us into the world of textual criticism. So before the printing press, every copy of a New Testament book had to be copied by hand. And even with great care, small differences could creep into manuscripts. Sometimes it was simply a mistake. Sometimes they might have made a spelling change. Sometimes they smoothed out a phrase that sounded unusual. And textual criticism is the work of tracing those differences back and asking, what did the original text say? Now, in the United Bible Society text, they have printed Son of God. But then below, they have showed that there is a textual variant of the chosen of God, or as we would say it, God's chosen one. Meaning that some old manuscripts said Son of God, while others said God's chosen one. Now, the committee of the United Bible Society noted that they chose Son of God because of the number and dates of the manuscripts that they had, and because Son of God fits well within John's Gospel, which regularly uses it for a title of Jesus. So, for example, near the end of the Gospel, John says that he wrote so that people would believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. So, Son of God feels like a natural fit. But this is where textual criticism gets interesting. Sometimes the reading that sounds smoother and more familiar is actually less likely to be the original. Why? Because scribes were often tempted to make difficult readings easier, and God's chosen one is definitely the more unusual expression. In fact, it's so unusual in John's Gospel that many scholars think that a scribe may have replaced it with the more familiar Son of God. And when you begin to look at the wider context, God's chosen one suddenly starts to make a lot of sense. A likely background is Isaiah 42:1. "Here is my servant, whom I uphold, my chosen one in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will bring justice to the nations." And that connection is striking because just moments earlier, John the Baptist has described the Spirit descending on Jesus. In other words, John the Baptist may be identifying Jesus as the Spirit-anointed servant of Isaiah 42, God's chosen one. And by that point, John has already referred to Isaiah at least twice. John the Baptist describes himself using Isaiah 40, and he calls Jesus the Lamb of God, which may echo Isaiah 53. And now perhaps he calls Jesus God's chosen one from Isaiah 42. So suddenly this strange little textual variant opens up a rich tapestry of biblical theology. John the Baptist isn't only pointing to Jesus as God's Messiah, but he also understands this Messiah to be the suffering servant. Now, textual variants don't mean that we can't trust the New Testament text. Not at all. In fact, textual criticism exists because we have so many manuscripts to compare, many more times than any other ancient text, and the overwhelming majority of differences between manuscripts are tiny and insignificant, and none of them affects any major Christian doctrine. In this case, whether the original reading is Son of God or God's Chosen One really isn't that significant in terms of our theology, because both titles are true of Jesus and can be demonstrated in other ways. But the variant does shape how we hear John the Baptist's testimony. Personally, I think that God's Chosen One is probably the original reading because of the strong Isaiah background in this section, and because scribes were more likely to smooth out the unfamiliar phrase rather than the reverse. And we're going to be looking at this on Sunday. We're going to look at how John the Baptist presents Jesus and what it means for us. I'll see you then. Three Crosses Church exists to know and glorify God by being and making disciples who love, trust, and obey Jesus.